One of the mitzvot in Parsha Teitzei is an explicit allusion to stories of Sefer Breshit, and it does so not to reinforce, or in simple reading, not to reinforce the stories of Breshit, but to exist in tension with the stories in Breshit. Okay, the Torah in our parsha prohibits a man with children from different wives to privilege the child of the wife whom he loves over the wife whom he loves less. Rather, the Torah says the birthright, the double portion of the firstborn son has to go to the firstborn son of whichever one is oldest, whichever child is oldest, not to the child, not to favor the child of the beloved wife. Okay, this is in tension with many examples in Sefer Breshit where our patriarchs and matriarchs conspire to ensure that the right child is the one who takes on the mantle of leadership and not necessarily the oldest child. So Yaakov over Esav, for example, and then especially in the family of Yaakov, amongst Yaakov's children, Yaakov is the one who had two wives, the beloved and the unloved, and the unloved wife had the firstborn son. Okay, it's exactly the case that the Torah is talking about here. So. Robert Cover wrote a famous article. He's a law professor, not a religious Jew. Wrote a famous article about this. He called it Nomos, a narrative. He spoke about Nomos means law, narrative of course means story, and how the two exist in tension within the Torah. Sometimes the stories reinforce and the law reinforce each other. Sometimes they exist in tension. I think here the Torah is so explicit in echoing the language of Sefer Breshit when it describes this mitzvah. On the source sheet, you can see some examples of the very language of the story of Yaakov and his wives and his children echoed in this prohibition against doing what Yaakov did. It's less about tension. It's like the Torah. It's like explicitly drawing our attention to the fact that this mitzvah prohibits what Yaakov did. So how do we understand that? So one way of understanding is that the Torah is warning us to say, Yaakov did this, and he may have had good reasons for doing what he did, but the result was really negative, so we're not going to let you do that again. That's like one possibility. Another possibility is that the Torah, the Jewish people had to start in an act of kind of iconoclastic rebellion against the existing idolatrous civilizations that existed at the time of Avram Avinu. But in order for Judaism to endure, we have to have some greater stability, and greater stability is ensuring the firstborn son inherits a double portion, so that estates can be preserved and family destinies and legacies can be passed on. And so, even though we were revolutionaries at our start, in order to sustain that message of what the Torah wants us to do, of ethical monotheism, we have to have a bit more regular procedures for passing on physical as well as spiritual legacies from one generation to the next. Another possibility is that we see that sometimes things are right for one time and one place. Another similar idea, but phrased a little differently. Things can be right for a certain time and certain place, but not right for a different time and a different place. A colleague of mine compared this to the prohibition in the Torah against building a matzeva, against building an altar, a private altar other than the Beis Hamikdash, right? So at certain points in the Torah, that seems that everyone did that. It seems that was fine. The Gemara acknowledges that, at one point it was fine, but then at a certain point it became not fine. God liked them, and then God didn't like them in a different context, right? Which makes a lot of sense. Most things in our life, they're good in some contexts, they're bad in other contexts. I tell my kids about, as a healthy food, I say, all foods are healthy food, in the right proportions, in moderation. Everything is healthy in moderation. Okay, so everything in its right time and place could be good, but in other contexts it's not. And so our patriarchs and matriarchs may have done the right thing, the necessary thing to ensure the survival of this Jewish message, this Jewish mission in Sefer Breshit, but it became not the right thing by the time Sefer rolls around, and so it becomes a prohibition. And the Torah echoes the language, so we pay attention to that. Okay, we don't ignore that. We pay attention to the fact that different times, different circumstances call for sometimes even different mitzvah. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Look forward to seeing you over the course of the day.